Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, California. March 17, 1938. 2:15 p.m. Two prison guards conducted a routine search of cell 181. Standard procedure. Every cell was searched monthly, looking for contraband, weapons, escape tools, anything prisoners weren't supposed to have. Cell 181 belonged to prisoner 85, Alphonse Gabriel Capone, age 39, serving 11 years for tax evasion, once the most powerful gangster in America, now a deteriorating shell of his former self. Tertiary syphilis destroying his brain. Most days, he barely recognized where he was. Guard Thomas Sullivan pulled out the small desk drawer, empty except for some papers. He started going through them. Prison regulations required reading everything. Prisoners sometimes hid messages in what looked like innocent writing. Most of the papers were nothing. Random words. Half-finished sentences. The writing of a man whose mind was failing. But one paper was different. A letter. Unsent. No envelope. No address. Just words on a page in Capone's increasingly shaky handwriting. Sullivan read it. Didn't understand it. Showed it to his partner, James Morrison. Morrison didn't understand it either. They took it to the warden. Warden James Johnston read the letter 3 times. He'd been running Alcatraz since it opened as a federal prison in 1934. He'd seen a lot of strange things. Elaborate escape plans, coded messages, prisoner artwork hiding maps. But this letter was different. It didn't look like a code. But it didn't make sense as regular writing either. The letter contained approximately 200 words, written in Capone's handwriting, verified by comparing it to other documents he'd signed. The content was strange. Numbers that could be coordinates, names of cities, names of restaurants, references to people Capone had known in the 1920s, dates, addresses, all mixed together with no apparent connection or logical flow. Johnston made copies, sent them to the FBI. This was potentially important. Capone had been the most powerful criminal in America. If he'd hidden money somewhere, if this letter contained information about his organization, if there were secrets that could help federal investigations, the FBI needed to know. The FBI received the letter on March 21, 1938. Special Agent William Harper in the San Francisco field office was assigned to analyze it. Harper was an expert in codes and ciphers. He'd broken encrypted messages from bootleggers and gangsters before. He looked at Capone's letter and immediately saw patterns that suggested it might be more than random writing. The numbers could be geographic coordinates, latitude and longitude. The cities and restaurants could be meeting places or locations where money was hidden. The names could be code names for associates or references to specific operations. The dates could indicate when transactions occurred or when things were hidden. Harper spent 2 weeks analyzing the letter, using every cryptographic technique he knew, trying different interpretation methods, looking for patterns, connections, hidden meanings. He found things that seemed significant, but couldn't confirm anything definitively. He requested more resources. The FBI sent the letter to their cryptography department in Washington, D.C. 3 specialists spent the next 4 months working on it, using mathematical analysis, frequency studies, contextual interpretation, historical research into Capone's known activities during the periods referenced in the letter. By September 1938, the FBI had spent approximately 6 months analyzing Capone's letter. They'd developed multiple theories about what it might mean, but none of them could be confirmed. The letter remained a mystery, intriguing, potentially significant, but ultimately unexplained. The leading theories were: Theory 1, treasure map. The numbers were coordinates, multiple locations where Capone had hidden money before his imprisonment. The cities and restaurants were reference points, ways to remember specific locations. The names were people who knew about the hiding places. The letter was Capone's attempt to create a record of where his fortune was buried, before his mind deteriorated completely. Theory 2. Operational code. The entire letter was coded communication. The numbers, names, and places all had alternate meanings known only to Capone's organization. This was a message to his former associates, instructions, or information they would understand. But law enforcement couldn't decode without the key. Theory 3. Mental deterioration. The letter was exactly what it appeared to be. Random thoughts from a man whose brain was being destroyed by disease. The numbers, names, and places had no hidden meaning. They were just fragments of memories. Things Capone was trying to hold on to as his mind failed. Nothing more significant than a dying man's confused attempt to remember his past. In September 1938, the FBI decided to do something unusual. They contacted Mae Capone, Al's wife. She'd been visiting him regularly at Alcatraz. She knew his current mental state better than anyone. Maybe she could explain what the letter meant. Mae Capone arrived at the San Francisco FBI office on September 14, 1938. Special Agent Harper showed her the letter, asked if she could interpret it, if she understood what her husband had been trying to communicate. Mae read the letter. Slowly, her expression showing a mixture of sadness and something else, maybe recognition, maybe understanding. She looked up at Harper. "This isn't a code," she said. "It's not treasure locations. It's not secret messages. It's just Al trying to remember." "Remember what?" Harper asked. "His life. Before prison. Before the trial. When things were good. When his mind worked properly. These aren't coordinates. They're addresses of places he visited, cities he traveled to, the restaurant names. Those are real restaurants, places where he ate meals he enjoyed. The names are friends he knew, people he spent time with. The dates are when these things happened." She pointed to specific parts of the letter. "See this. 41-1-1-1-1-81 north. That's not a hiding place. That's the approximate latitude of Chicago, where we lived. 87.6298 west. That's the longitude. He's remembering home. And this. Giovanni's on Taylor Street. That was a real restaurant. We ate there all the time in the 20s. He loved their pasta. And this name here. Jimmy the Knife. That was Jimmy Belcastro, Al's friend. They had dinner together probably 100 times. Harper was skeptical. "Mrs. Capone, your husband was one of the most sophisticated criminals in American history. Are you suggesting this letter is just him reminiscing, writing down memories?" "Yes, exactly that. My husband's mind is failing. He knows it. It terrifies him. He's losing his memories, forgetting things that mattered to him. So he writes them down, trying to hold on to them. The letter isn't communicating anything to anyone else. It's Al trying to communicate with his future self, trying to preserve what's left of his memories before the disease takes them completely." She handed the letter back to Harper. "You've wasted 6 months looking for secret meanings in a dying man's memory list. There's nothing hidden here, just sadness. Just a man trying to remember what it felt like when his brain worked and his life had meaning." The FBI was unsatisfied with this explanation. Too simple, too mundane. They continued investigating for another month, but eventually concluded that Mae was probably right. The letter appeared to be exactly what she'd described, a confused attempt by a deteriorating prisoner to document memories he feared losing. In November 1938, the investigation was closed. The letter was filed away, classified as interesting but ultimately meaningless. Al Capone continued his deterioration in Alcatraz. His syphilis progressed. His mental state worsened. He spent his last years in prison confused, occasionally violent, often unaware of where he was or who he'd been. He was released in November 1939 after serving 7.5 years. Went home to Florida, lived with Mae. His condition continued to worsen. He died on January 25, 1947, at age 48, caused by cardiac arrest following a stroke. His mind had been gone for years before his body finally failed. The letter was forgotten, one small mystery in the vast FBI archives, occasionally referenced in histories of Alcatraz or studies of Capone's final years, but generally considered a dead end. Mae's explanation seemed definitive, just memories, nothing more. Until 2015. Dr. Sarah Chen was a historian researching organized crime in the Prohibition era. She was writing a book about Al Capone's business operations. She requested access to FBI files through the Freedom of Information Act. Among the documents she received was a copy of the 1938 letter. Chen read the letter with fresh eyes. She wasn't a cryptographer, wasn't trying to decode it. She was a historian. She wanted to understand what it revealed about Capone's life and thinking. She started researching the specific references, the cities, the restaurants, the names, the dates, and she discovered something the FBI had missed. The numbers in the letter were coordinates, but not to treasure. They were precise locations of specific buildings, and every single one of those buildings had been locations of Capone's operations during the 1920s. Speakeasies, brothels, gambling houses, warehouses where he stored liquor. The restaurant names were real restaurants, but several of them had been fronts for Capone's businesses. Giovanni's on Taylor Street, real restaurant, but also a meeting place where Capone conducted business with corrupt politicians and police. The personal names. Many of them were real people, but several were aliases, code names that Capone's organization had used for specific operations or specific roles. The dates corresponded to major events in Capone's criminal career. Deals made, shipments received, competitors eliminated. Chen realized that Mae had lied to the FBI, or had told a partial truth that concealed something more important. The letter was a memory aid. Mae had been right about that. But it wasn't just reminiscing about happy times. It was Capone's attempt to document his empire before his mind failed completely. A record of locations, operations, contacts, and events that had defined his organization. Why would Mae lie? Why would she dismiss the letter as meaningless when it actually contained significant historical information? Chen's theory, Mae was protecting her husband. Even in 1938, even after he'd been imprisoned and his organization had fallen apart, there were still people who might have used information from that letter. Rival gangs who'd want to know where Capone had hidden assets. Federal investigators who might use the information to prosecute people who'd worked with Capone. Mae understood that the letter was dangerous, so she'd explained it in the most harmless way possible. Just memories, just restaurants, nothing important. And the FBI had believed her, because she'd told them what they expected to hear from a wife protecting a deteriorating husband. Because the simple explanation was easier to accept than continued investigation. Because by 1938, Capone was no longer a priority. His empire was destroyed. He was a dying prisoner. Why spend more resources analyzing his confused writings? Chen published her findings in 2016. Her book included detailed analysis of the letter, showing how each reference connected to specific documented events in Capone's career, demonstrating that the letter was actually a sophisticated attempt to preserve organizational memory while making it look like random reminiscence. The revelation didn't lead to treasure. The locations Capone had documented were known to historians. The operations were long closed. The people were mostly dead. Nothing in the letter provided information that could be acted upon 78 years later. But it changed the understanding of Capone's final years. He wasn't just a deteriorating prisoner losing his mind and randomly writing down memories. He was a man who understood he was losing his mind and who tried to preserve what he knew in a way that looked innocent to anyone who found it. Mae's explanation to the FBI, just restaurants he remembers, nothing more, was genius, because it was partially true. They were real restaurants. He did remember them, but they were also more than that. And Mae knew it, and she'd protected that truth for the rest of her life. Mae died in 1986. She never publicly discussed the letter again after that 1938 FBI interview. If she'd known what it really contained, if she'd understood the full significance of what her husband had written, she took that knowledge to her grave. In 2018, a journalist asked Dr. Chen whether she thought Mae had intentionally lied to the FBI or whether she genuinely believed the letter was just memories. Chen's answer was careful. Mae was extremely intelligent. She'd been married to Al Capone for 20 years by 1938. She understood his world. She'd protected him and protected herself throughout the most dangerous period of American organized crime. When she looked at that letter, I believe she understood exactly what it was. And she made a strategic decision to present it as something harmless. She protected her husband's remaining dignity and protected anyone who might have been endangered by the information that letter contained. She lied to the FBI with the most believable lie possible, a partial truth. The letter remains in FBI archives, now properly understood. Not a treasure map, not meaningless rambling, but something more interesting. A criminal's attempt to document his empire while making it look like a dying man's confused memories, a wife's successful deception of federal investigators, a mystery that took 77 years to solve, and a reminder that sometimes the simplest explanation, it's just a list of restaurants, is the perfect cover for something more complicated. Al Capone wrote that letter in March 1938. His mind was failing. He knew it. He was trying to preserve what he knew, but he was also trying to protect it, making it look innocent to anyone who found it. And when the FBI did find it, when they spent 6 months trying to decode it, his wife gave them the answer that ended their investigation. Just memories, just restaurants, just a dying man trying to hold on to pieces of his past. The FBI believed her, filed the letter away, moved on to more important investigations, and Mae Capone walked out of that FBI office having successfully protected her husband's final legacy. 6 months of FBI analysis, defeated by a wife's simple explanation. He's just remembering places he liked to eat. Perfect lie. Partial truth. Exactly what the FBI wanted to hear. Exactly what ended the investigation. Exactly what protected the real meaning for 77 years, until a historian looked at the evidence with fresh eyes and understood what Mae had known all along. The letter was real. The memories were real. The restaurants were real. But they meant more than Mae admitted. And she knew it. And she protected it. Until everyone involved was dead and the truth could no longer hurt anyone. That's the story of March 1938. Guards finding a letter. FBI analyzing it for months. A wife explaining it away with perfect simplicity. And decades later, the truth emerging. Not treasure. Not random thoughts. But one last criminal record. Hidden in plain sight. Protected by a lie so believable that nobody questioned it until it was too late to matter.